In this lesson, we were changing percents to fractions and decimals, but then we're also going to learn how to change decimals into percents and fractions into percents. Our first example is 21%. And remember, we said percent means per hundred, or number out of 100. So 21% would mean 21 out of 100. And anytime we write fractions, we want to make sure we put the answers in simplest form, or we want to reduce them. So we ask ourselves, is there anything that can go into both 21 and 100? And since there's no number that can go evenly into 21 and 100, we know this is our simplest form reduced answer. But now we need to take this same percent, 21%, and write it as a decimal. If we look back at this fraction, 21 hundredths, and we think of our decimal place values, we know that right behind the decimal is the tenths place, then we have the hundredths place. So 21 hundredths written as a decimal would be decimal 21, and we would read that as 21 hundredths. And the shortcut to changing a percent into a decimal is simply taking the decimal, which would start behind the whole number, and move it 2 times to the left. And that would give us the decimal answer 21 hundredths. 50% means 50 out of 100. Now we have to see if we can reduce 50 hundredths. Well, there are a number of options to divide by here. We could divide by 2, by 5, by 10, by 25, or by 50. Well, if we divide by the greatest common factor of 50, we just have one division step to do. It's okay if you divide by a smaller common factor and then divide again to reduce. It's fine as long as your final answer as a fraction form would be 1/2. Now we need to change 50% into a decimal. So we know that means 50 hundredths. We know the hundredths place is the second place behind the decimal, so we fill in 50 hundredths. Keeping in mind that the zeros at the end of a decimal are optional, we need to also know that 5/10 would be an appropriate answer as well. Again, a reminder on the shortcut. The decimal starts behind the 0. We move it 2 times to the left, and we have 50 hundredths, which we had before we erased that extra decimal. That 0 is optional. If you put it, it's correct. If you leave it off, it's correct. We have 136% now. 136 out of 100 is an improper fraction. So the first thing we would have to do is change the improper fraction into a mixed number. We get 1/36 over 100. Then we have to ask ourselves if that can be reduced. If we bring the problem down here to give a little bit more space, we know that 4 can go into both 36 and 100. So the reduced form would be 1 9/25. If we take the percent, decimal starts there, move it 2 times to the left. The decimal ends up between the 1 and the 3. So we have 1 36 hundredths. If you notice, this 1 36 hundredths is the same name as that 1 36 hundredths. You can see the connection there and that the shortcut does work. Now in number 5, we're changing 57 hundredths, the decimal, into a percent. So if the shortcut to change a percent into a decimal works, to move the decimal 2 times to the left, then if we move the decimal 2 times to the right, we can make a decimal number into a percent number quickly. Because 57 hundredths means 57 out of 100. 57% means 57 out of 100. They have the same value and the same meaning. On number 6, we move the decimal to the right 2 times. The decimal is now between the 7 and the 5, and we have 37 5/10%. On number 7, again, we move the decimal 2 times to the right. The decimal is in front of the 9, so we have 9/10%, and we can put that optional 0 in front of the decimal. We can leave it off if we like. On number 9, we're moving the decimal 2 times to the right. So in doing so, we end up with this extra space there. So we know we always put zeros in empty spaces. The decimal is behind that 0, so our percent would be 60%. Now, to change fractions into percents, we keep in mind that percent means per hundred. So if we have a fraction like this first example, 45 over 50, and 50 goes evenly into 100, we can simply write the like fraction. 50 times 2 is 100, 45 times 2 is 90, and then change the 90 hundredths into a percent in that form. That's a much quicker way than what we would have to do from one like number 17, 1/12. Because 12 does not go evenly into 100, we need to do a division problem. Keeping in mind that this fraction line means to divide, we would divide 12 into 1. 12 doesn't go into 1, so we add a decimal in 0. 12 can't go into 10 either, so we add another 0. 12 goes into 100 8 times. 8 times 12 is 96. And we subtract and we get 4. We add another 0 and bring down. 12 into 40 is 3. 3 times 12 is 36. And now we see that this decimal is going to keep repeating at 3. So we can stop. And we know that this is going to equal 1/12 equals 0.0833 with a repeating 3. But we now have to change that into a percent. So it's multiple steps. You're going to first do the division, change the fraction into a decimal, and then you're going to take this decimal and you're going to change it into a percent, just like we did on the previous problems. Move the decimal 2 times to the right. The decimal's now there. You have 8 and 33 hundredths with a repeating decimal percent. Or you can write 8 and 3/10 with the repeating decimal percent. We'll do one more. 7 over 800. To change that into a decimal, which is what we have to do before we can change it into a percent. Remember, we have to get this fraction into a decimal form. We would divide 800 into 7. 800 doesn't go into 7, so we add a decimal in 0. 800 doesn't go into 70, so we add another 0. 800 doesn't go into 700, so we add another 0. 800 does go into 7,000. 8 times. 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 8 is 64. So here we're just doing long division. We add another 0 and bring that down. And now 800 into 4,000 goes evenly. So the division's done. And we have this decimal. 875 hundred thousandths. We move the decimal 2 times to the right. The decimal's now in front of the 8. So we would have that percent. And when the directions tell you round to the nearest hundredth, we look at that hundredths place, look behind it, there's a 5, and it would tell us to round it to 88 hundredths of a percent.